This is the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast, where divorce coach Corey Shapiro helps you get creative and not reactive in your divorce. Tune in now to get the support you need to make it through this difficult time. Here's your divorce coach, Corey Shapiro.
Welcome to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. This is Corey Shapiro, and our topic today is we're focusing on core needs, understanding your core needs in your divorce. Such good work to think about. We're going to touch on that today. We're also going to answer a question about how to make better decisions when you're so stressed. And it's so easy to be stressed in your divorce. But before we get into our coaching corner, talking about our topic or our question, let's start with our weekly quote. It goes like this. We find ourselves on different sides of a line that nobody drew. Though it all may be one in the higher eye, down here where we live, it is two. That quote is from a song, Different Sides, by one of my favorite artists, Leonard Cohen, his 2012 album, Old Ideas. Unfortunately, as you know, or most of you know, Leonard Cohen is not with us. He died back in 2016. But I think what he's saying in his poetic way is, listen, it's what my mom was saying. It takes two to tango. And don't we need two people to agree on moving forward with a divorce? In most cases, yes, unless you want one of those derailed divorces where someone has to make a decision that someone is a judge in a black robe, a stranger. So let's see what we can do to think about what's in our control so we can move on with this divorce in a way that works for you. All right, this is a big topic to consider, understanding your core needs. And the first thing I want you to think about is the distinction between achieving what is important to you versus what is fair. And why this is so important is because fair is subjective. Everyone has an opinion of what is fair. Your friends who went through a divorce, people who you don't even know tell you what they think. You go on Google and you look around and well, this is the law. This is what should happen. Everything's very, very particular. But if you look at it, what's important to me? That's unique. So, for example, in another context, so many cars to choose from. But what do I need? Am I valuing reliability? Well, if I do value reliability, there's only one or two cars to get because they're always on top. It's a Toyota or a Lexus. Just go to Consumer Reports. But if I want something flashy, maybe like my cousin, I'm really into Corvettes and that's what I want. But that's not maybe a reliable car, maybe not a car you need for a family. And maybe you have to have two cars, which is a different budget. All right. So the second thing I want you to understand is, what are you valuing and what are you overvaluing or maybe undervaluing? A lot of times you get derailed divorces because we're overvaluing revenge. We also may be overvaluing peace. How can that be in a derailed divorce? Well, if we overvalue peace in a derailed divorce, then we're probably just trying to settle the case, and we're probably not doing what is necessary to prepare our case for trial early on, early in the process, when there's not so much pain from the court. In the first year or two of your divorce, it's sort of Wild West, and the court really just drops the hammer the longer you're in the system in most situations. Maybe you're in one of the situations where the court's dropping the hammer early on, then you're going to have to accelerate this process. But in a big city like New York, it's a lot of room before the judge starts dropping the hammer. And how they drop the hammer? Well, they say your case is going to trial. So what are you overvaluing? What are you undervaluing? Third, I want you to understand the end game. Begin with the end in mind. I will say that it's really hard to know. exactly the end game. So that's not what I'm saying, exactly what's going to happen. But I want you to think about what's important to you and have ranges. And is the end game rooted in your needs, or is it unclear? And a lot of times it is unclear because we haven't even thought about the end game because we're so reactive on the here and now. We're fighting these little battles, but these little battles is not what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus in on tuning out that noise, which lawyers are so good at amplifying, and focus on your goals. Fourth, and this is a tough one, especially if you're not comfortable with conflict, is I want you to rethink your approach to it. I want you to think of four different ways of thinking about resolutions and conflict. You could adapt. We can always adapt to a position. And, don't think it's only given in because you might be overvaluing something else. Maybe you're adapting to a situation because you want peace. Maybe you have a 50-50 parenting schedule. The other parent, not really deserving 50-50, never was interested. But, if you, God forbid, pass away, they will be okay. They will get better. They're not going to, it's not going to be neglectful, that parent. That's adapting to a situation. You could exit the situation, just put your head in the sands. I've seen a lot of cases where people separated for years. They haven't done anything. So you can exit the situation and maybe you'll stay separated for decades. Another way is to force. And that's what, is the traditional court. That's the traditional litigation path. That's the traditional trial path. What's very interesting, I'm going to talk about this on this podcast, maybe later this season, is what happens to cases where you force your position. Are you any happier? It sort of reminds me of like those lottery cases where those people actually win. Are they happier after they win? Short answer, most cases not. And then last, I want you to think about collaborating. If you're like collaborating, what are you talking about, Corey? This is a Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. We're not going to collaborate with them. They're the enemy. I want us to evolve our understanding of that word. I don't want you to think it's narrow, that you only can collaborate with someone you fully trust. I want you to think you can collaborate with someone with, guardrails, if you will, to get things done. And that's what I want you to think about for this conflict. And finally, I want you to surround yourself with a board of directors. You have your divorce lawyer. You have your financial advisor. Maybe you have mental health professionals. All these people are going to help you make better decisions when you're stressed. And you're going to learn and you're going to evolve your thinking. One person that should not be on your board of directors is what I'm going to call a guru. This may be a friend, a family member, someone who's been through divorce, someone who knows it all because they had one divorce from their personal experience, or maybe their friend had a divorce. Everything's very different, very different. You want to have on your board someone who has a wide spectrum of experiences in very different contexts and very different divorces and very different judges. I always tell people, you can put the same case before 10 judges, you might get 10 different results. So have on your board professionals who are objective and not going to project their own biases, their own subjective experience onto you. Okay, that's a lot to absorb, but I just try to touch on these points. These points are deep. Don't worry. We're going to go through each concept of my book, Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind. But if you want to just go right into that chapter and get it going, you could do so and fast forward. Okay, so let's move on to our question. If you want to have a question for the podcast, you can go to question.gettingdivorced.org. Our question today is, how can I make informed decisions when I'm feeling so emotional? Well, the simple answer, and I always like to keep it simple, at least at first, is one step at a time. Let me give an analogy. I've been taking up piano. I actually bought a piano a few years ago, It's actually probably been like 5 years, and I was doing these apps and I really wasn't getting any better. And I finally found a teacher, and I go weekly. And I have to say, it has really helped because each week I'm only getting maybe not even 1% better, maybe 0.5% stronger. But I feel there's a path laid out where I'm learning the chords, I'm learning the notes, I'm learning how to understand the language of music, where I'm not just, learning songs willy nilly based on my own preferences. So there's a path. And that's what I want you to think about. It's just getting a little stronger, 1% each week. Surround yourself with that board to really help you make better decisions when you are faking it. Sometimes you're going to have to fake it until you make it. And sometimes these divorces move quick. And if you're just in a grieving situation, you're really going to have to defer to trusted advisors. All right. If you like this episode, check out my conversations. They're a little bit more in depth than these podcasts, a little longer. My most recent one was with Zoe Slotoff, Dr. Zoe Slotoff, and it was about moments of mindfulness. And I think you might really enjoy it. Before you all move on with your week, let me just share a final thought. I want you to think about divorce in 3 parts. The first part is this transformational journey from feeling stuck to seeking support. I need help. I may not be thinking of things in the best way. Maybe other people can help me. That's that first start. The second is a growing mindset where you're taking this information in and you're starting to evolve your thinking. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time if your beliefs are so strong, because you have to really unpack those beliefs to have the growing mindset. When I wrote my book, I'm literally, and I'm not joking, literally for like a year, I wrote like a word and I couldn't even go further than that because it was like, this sucks. You're not a writer. Or I read a page and I go, this is terrible. And that's that critical parent. And until I unpacked that, until I heard other very successful novelists who had that critical parent in their minds, they weren't able to get into that flow, to write, to grow. And that's the growing mindset. All right. The third part is moving from being reactive to being proactive, to creating or co-creating the life you want, having that vision. How do you see your life post-divorce? That's going to be your compass, and you're going to be pulled to it. And that really is, I think, so important because it's going to help you move through your divorce in a much better way. All right, listen, I'm truly grateful for all of you taking this journey with me on this podcast this season. You're growing stronger each week. And I fully believe that you're all able to get divorced without losing your mind. If you want to share your success story, you're a little further along and maybe you're post-divorce, send me an email at feedback@gettingdivorced.org. This is Corey Shapiro. See you next week. And remember, be creative, not reactive.
Thank you for tuning in to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast with divorce coach Corey Shapiro. Divorce can be a difficult and overwhelming process, but it doesn't have to be. Corey's book, Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind, is here to help you gain clarity, composure, and a strategic mindset. Get it now as an ebook on Amazon or an audiobook on Audible, and unlock the power of these resources to make more informed decisions and gain better understanding of the process. This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.